Time now for Outsiders. I'm Barry Cassidy, and you're not.
Uncle Barry, thank you so much. 21 away from 10. Outsiders time indeed, and they are this morning. Blogger, contributor to New Matilda, among other places, Mark Fletcher, writer and broadcaster Tony Moclair, and researcher Sabine Wolfe. Welcome all.
Lovely to be here, Jonathan.
Is it? Good morning. Is it really?
But always. This is publicly funded fun.
That's right. That's the best sort of fun. Now, this was one of my absolute favourite moments of the week.
Especially on protection of refugees and asylum seekers, in right of the children of refugees in education and also other rights. We have also asked about whether these refugees will be illegally repatriated to other countries.
That's China's Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, Li Baoding, who raised concerns about the treatment of refugees by this country, which is...
From a country with an impeccable human rights record itself.
It did seem a little bit rich.
Yeah. Well, you could look at that both ways, I guess, that when you were being ticked off by people with said impeccable human rights record, maybe you've overstepped some sort of a mark.
I think a great man once said, always check the background of your critics. So I wouldn't be putting too much stock in getting ticked off by the Chinese on something like that.
But however, the story continues to unfold, and Mark Fletcher, I don't know if you've seen the statement from Immigration Minister Scott Morrison overnight. It was released at the newspaper deadline unfriendly hour of 8:45 p.m, saying that everything he said about the right of asylum last week was in fact wrong. You've caught that, Mark?
Yes, but more importantly, I caught the earlier statement, which was the minister saying he could guarantee the safety of everybody within the detention centre. And given the hour that it came out last night, I wonder if he's also saying that statement was also untrue, and what the nature of the guarantee was. It's all very well to say, lifetime guarantees on things when there's actually no way of making good on that claim later on.
I mean, this is awkward, Sabine, is it not? I mean, obviously, this is a difficult situation which unfolded quickly and in chaos, and details will be hard to pin down, but the Minister was very emphatic at the beginning of the week that he could guarantee the safety of these asylum seekers if only they would stay inside the fence.
Details might be hard to pin down, but I feel like inside the fence and outside the fence is a clear line. It either happened one way or the other, and I don't quite understand why it is that in the immigration portfolio there just seems to be this particularly strong sense of being so duplicitous. I'm not quite sure why it is that things need to be hidden all the time and then retracted and then quietly put out again. Why not just come out and say it in the first place?
It's an interesting point about the conduct of Operation Sovereign Borders, all capitals through that sentence, that it's been part of the shtick, is to make it sound like a military operation, therefore it's secret, and that's working against their interests in this particular instance, I think. It's the flow of information's been awkward, that's made this worse.
Except when you're posting details on websites of names of asylum seekers and that sort of stuff. There was a breach this week, so Morrison could point to that, saying he has been open at least in that sense.
Our IT calamities show our commitment to full disclosure.
Just let's take a step back and just look at this from a political communications perspective. I mean, their political aim here is to put it out that they've stopped the boats. And I mean, do you know that they've stopped the boats? They have actually stopped the boats, but no one would actually know that because they're being so secretive all the time.
And we only know what they tell us.
Yeah, they can't even achieve their own political objective if they can't communicate.
What was that there, Mark?
You also need to be careful on what you mean by stop the boats. And what they've said really is that they're stopping them from getting into Australia. They haven't actually stopped them from coming. And it's a weird distinction to sort of play in political language of, we've got this deterrent factor, with the language deterrence still in the debate when it shouldn't be. And yet they're still coming, and we still have to push them back or send them back in these giant orange lifeboats. So the phrase "stop the boats," I think itself is a strange phrase when they don't actually stop from coming. Just we block them from getting in.
And the framing of this entire discussion I mean, I think it leaves us all with this moment of great national awkwardness of whether we consider that the ends justify the means here. Is it a reasonable course towards that objective of stopping the boats? Is it a reasonable course to do what we do at Manus Island? Are we comfortable with that?
Well, you can argue that, yes, we are, if 1,200 people aren't drowning, as happened under the previous government. So as distasteful and disagreeable as Manus Island is, if it's preventing people from getting on unseaworthy boats and risking the lives of themselves and their children, and we don't have another 1,200 people drowning, that is a good outcome.
Which is speculative, and the reality of that outcome is that we may not have the 1,200 people drowning, but we do have 1,300 people locked away without processing, without any sense of their potential outcome. And then the best outcome that we might offer them is to, who knows, be resettled in PNG somehow. We don't know how that might happen. We don't know when. That's
Sure, and I think Mark's point about, stopping the boats and how they may have been stopped from coming here, but, they're still sort of coming, they're just being turned back. I think it's a real shame that our political consciousness ends at the end of our territorial waters, or, 500 metres into Indonesia's territorial waters.
on numerous occasions. Well, this is true, isn't it, Mark? I mean, what we've seen here is a very broad and awkward question that's been very simply reframed. We don't have to do anything about the bigger issue of transcontinental migration. All we have to do to make this a win in Australian politics is stop the boats. Is that just brushing it under the carpet?
I think it shows the poverty in the debate when the consequentialists can just win by saying, look at the outcome is no drowned babies, no drowned people. Therefore, whatever we did to get to that point is the right way to go. And I say this as a person who's actually broadly comfortable with offshore processing. And still, the way that the conversation is framed is trust the government to do whatever it can to stop people dying at sea. And this isn't a fulfilling, it's not a rich, and it's not a satisfying way to frame the conversation. It's also a conversation which we've seen has taken away sort of the voice from the local PNG residents themselves, who up until this week were mostly invisible. We were talking about the health concerns of asylum seekers, but not the health concerns of people who are already in the community. When we moved from East Timor to Manus Island and PNG, the East Timorese vanished from our conversation. They just become invisible. They're the background to this national conversation where the face is Scott Morrison, Sarah Hanson-Young, Ian Rintoul, these sorts of people, but never the locals.
I'm going to make a prediction. You heard this first here. I would say that it's, I reckon, entirely likely that this week that they will close Manus Island.
Really? That's an interesting prediction.
You base it on what, Jonathan?
An infallible instinct for what's about to occur.
Right, okay.
Ex cathedra.
Well, I think it could become very quickly more trouble than it's worth. It's a Labour initiative. It can be consigned in a sense. This was a bad planning. This was a Kevin Rudd policy on the run. This was never thought through. The memorandum of understanding with PNG runs to 2 pages. There are no details. Get out of this now while we can.
Do you think, though, that having embraced it so thoroughly and, sort of put on the whole cheerleading outfit and, yes, Manus Island, do you really think that they can walk away from it so quickly, though? I'm just wondering how that's going to play out.
And what if they just cannot control it? I mean, the polling suggests that the Australian people are still behind this as an idea, that people overwhelmingly support the toughness of the government's position. But will that endure if there's more death and mayhem?
We don't know if there will be more death and mayhem. It depends how good you are at looking into the future, Jonathan. As far as I know, I think 10X are the company now that are taking over security. There would be obviously quite a vigorous prompting from the government to step up security at Manus Island so that something like this doesn't happen again, because it is so obviously politically embarrassing. I think there could be withdrawal with honour from Manus Island. It could happen, but the question is, where do they go next? What options are actually open to the government at this stage?
Well, apparently the
offshore processing.
Foreign Minister is talking to Cambodia about a Cambodian arrangement, much like the Malaysian solution.
See, the problem I have here is, I think offshore processing is absolutely terrible. And you say they're going to close Manus, and I think, maybe they'll finally bring them on shore, but they won't. It's just going to be one more disappointment after disappointment. And, I just, every time I approach this debate, I just feel so miserable about it. It's, I really think it brings out the worst in us.
It's one of those debates too, Mark, where we've nudged it so far in one direction that a lot of options, as Sabine suggests there, onshore processing would no longer apply popularly as an option. We've sort of changed the parameters around this discussion really comprehensively.
Yeah, it became almost an identity politics area where you affirmed onshore processing to assert a certain kind of identity, or you affirmed offshore processing to affirm a different sort. And you see, even this week, I've been just in shock at what's occurred, and I'm broadly in support. And yet still you see the conversation go on and the rhetoric from the weirdos that live on the internet like me. But there's still the sort of blaming of the asylum seekers themselves. Like, if only they hadn't decided to skip the queues, go regularly, try to sneak into Australia, they wouldn't be in the position they are now. And it's that level of horribleness, that mealy-mouthed, just vindictive and pettiness that I think is swept into that conversation that you'll just never shift. Even something as horrific as this week still doesn't shift, still doesn't clean out the stables of gunk that has just built up around this debate.
10 to 10, outsiders here on Sunday Extra. They are Mark Fletcher, Tony Moclair and Sabine Wolfe. Treasurer's having a bit of a moment. He's got all his friends in Sydney, and is being able to say we should as a world be going for growth. Though it's not a promise or a proposition without its complexities.
If our health and welfare and education systems stay exactly the same, Australia is going to run out of money to pay for them, and we'll either have to have a massive increase in taxes, or we're going to have to look at ways that we can restructure the system to make it sustainable.
It would appear, Tony, that we have rediscovered the budget emergency.
Every new government has a budget emergency, don't they? It's just the par for the course. You flag the cuts early.
Forgot it for a bit. I mean, it had it during the election, and in that sort of strange 1939 post-election phony war period, it just drifted off as we enjoyed our summer. But it's back.
Well, good. It might reinvigorate the political debate. Joe Hockey seems to be having these Banana Republic moment. That's how it appears to me. It's a bit of a wake-up call, people. We're going to live a lot longer. We can't have the age pension at 65 anymore. It's a bit of a, that's how I took it. It was him trying to scare some common sense into us.
He's spot on, of course, I mean, the budget is all the things that he says it is, and the issues are as profound as he says they are. The problem with all this is that it wasn't really discussed in those terms when we had a chance to choose our government.
Sure, I think we get a bit caught up on the idea of election mandates. There was so much disillusionment around
the whole democratic thing.
No, but there was so much disillusionment around the last election that, if you said to people, did you know that the government was talking about this stuff before the election, they probably would have said, well, yes, because I think they really assumed the worst anyway. They weren't really hearing too much. But I don't think, you magically get a mandate handed down from on high from the electorate. I think, you need to create that yourself when you talk, to the electorate about your policies, and you have these ideas that you want to put out there, then you create your own mandate by communicating effectively.
Which is where the Banana Republic thing is instructive, because that's Keating doing precisely that, is saying in government that there is this situation and it's dramatic and it's going to require some tough things to resolve it. Hockey is doing very much that same thing.
I feel like a really good example as well is the GST. I mean, we were told never ever, but, we have it now. But
that was taken to an election.
Yeah, it was taken to an election, but they did all this sort of groundwork beforehand, and I feel like that's something that could be missing in the current debate. Like, it just seems that they're floating thought bubbles here and there, and someone will come out and say something, and then someone will walk it back.
That perhaps, Mark, gives an idea of the sense of urgency around what they're trying to grapple with. I think they have a profound and fairly desperate problem.
Not being an applied economist, I sort of don't understand what they're trying to grapple with. All I see is sort of these people sort of nodding at me earnestly and saying in deep, gravelly voices, yes, there actually is a budget emergency, trust us, trust us, trust us, there's an emergency. I think I want more from my government than just being sort of bean counter accountants who are like, oh, no, we might be running out of money, maybe, quickly we need to do, all these things that just happen to fit in with the ideology of the party for the last 10 years. Isn't that convenient? I'm not sure that I want this from a government. I'm not sure that I just want this sort of blinded, focused, obsessed conversation about the budget as if it was sort of some sort of household budget that we're going to run out of money mysteriously.
It is a tricky thing, Sabine, that the solutions to the problem do fit rather neatly with the kit bag of agenda items that have been toted for some years.
I mean, is that really an illegitimate thing, though? I think governments do have the right to stamp their own political opinion on what they're doing, and if they can make that fit within that, then why wouldn't you? I just don't think that's being a problem.
It gets a little bit unstuck when, for example, you argue that every factory closure is due to the unsustainability of the award regime, and that may or not be true in those situations, but to apply that as the universal solution might actually exclude other possibilities that are a better fit for those circumstances.
Yeah, it's not a good look if you're saying money's tight, but you find $100 million for a Royal Commission into the building industry, for example. that could be. That might be a difficult sell politically.
Or one for pink bats, in the pursuit of which you abandon 113 years of cabinet confidentiality.
Or let's be honest, the paid parental leave scheme. I mean, we can find these areas of hypocrisy everywhere, and there are contradictions, and I don't think they've been particularly good at managing those.
I mean, there are contradictions of it, and we talked about mandate earlier. I mean, there's the anti-mandate, of course, where you go to an election saying we won't cut health, we won't cut education, we won't cut SBS and the ABC, and then subsequently find the circumstances under which those things may well be
You're calling
desirable.
them cuts. You can spin that another way. You could just say quarantine funding. All that. You're using the wrong kind of terms here, Jonathan.
Well, indeed, but then, I think we're not yet seen the tip of the iceberg of kites that are about to be flown on the back of the Audit Commission. I mean, we've had the talk about the Medicare co-payment, and that's been revived. I wonder how much that was revived this week as a response to the Manus Island situation. It was a bit of taking out the trash, perhaps, with the Medicare co-payment.
Well, what are they talking, $6?
Well, they're not talking a figure now. That was a proposal earlier.
I just think it's interesting that in the paper that initially came out of, it was really a really small amount of money over 4 years. I think it was $800 million over 4 years. And
it doesn't do much to the budget.
No, and I just feel like if you are going to engage in those sort of reforms, and let's face it, reform, there are going to be losers from reform, and hopefully you're doing it with the idea that structurally the economy will be better off in the long run. And I'm just not sure that this really works on that measure.
And I wonder, Mark, if that's the discussion too. We're sort of scrabbling together money to try and, in a very quick time, adjust deficits, and when perhaps, as Sabine suggests, the real discussion should be about long-term reform that adjusts structural issues.
I'm not sure that I agree that the goal should be sort of a structural change in the economy, simply because it sort of subordinates all other policy to economic policy, which I think is a bad thing, and you don't really want that from a certain perspective when you're after a healthcare system that actually provides health services to people. You sort of want to go for that being the policy goal first and then work out how to fund it afterwards, rather than, let's tinker around the edges and add $6 co-payments here because that will somehow get rid of a waste that we won't identify. And that's sad. That's not the way that policy should work in a mature debate. This is how you win political points.
And yet, we have Joe Hockey out there championing a particular line of argument. I mean, arguing for a particular set of principles and an agenda which is broadly reformist and with some honesty.
And I do think that's to be commended, but I think the point about economic reform is that, you need to couch it in terms of what does this actually mean for people in real terms down the track. So I think economic, growth and productivity, these are concepts that aren't particularly meaningful to people. But, if you say, if we don't reform the economy now, then we won't be able to pay for your healthcare down the track. That actually does make a difference.
And I think that's, that's the way that it's begun to be discussed in those sorts of tough terms. Thank you all. That is it for us. That is it for Outsiders this week. And they have been Mark Fletcher, writer and blogger, comedian, broadcaster Tony Moclair, writer and researcher Sabine Wolfe. And that's it for Sunday Extra as well. First Dog on the Moon you may have just missed. He will be back next week, having sunned himself on the New South Wales Riviera. On RN Next, 360 documentaries. Today, the story...
Okay. So, once again, everything Tony Abbott's government touches is turning to shit in front of their very eyes. One could say that he has very sexy hands. Everything he touches, he fucks. Just like Charles Abbott, who was such an ineffective administrator of the Northern Territory that you might as well call him a quisling. He even dismantled all civil defences in the lead up to the Darwin raid by the Japanese. And, of course, using the new Australian Liberal National Party principle of guilt by association, you'd have to wonder why we've got a Prime Minister called Abbott when Abbott was the biggest idiot, biggest goose, biggest quisling in the nation in the whole of the Second World War. You wouldn't get, Tony Quisling elected the Prime Minister of Norway, would you? But in the meantime, at least we've proved that swamp wallabies are not afraid of wind turbines. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.